The lantern light flickered against the canvas of the tent, throwing restless shadows across the sand-colored fabric, and Eliza's voice cut through the silence like the crack of a whip. "I want to spend one unforgettable night with you." The words hung in the air, heavy and defiant, like a shot fired into the stillness of the desert night. The Apache warrior, tall, broad-shouldered, his chest marked with scars that told the story of battles fought and survived, stood frozen. His black hair fell in loose waves past his shoulders, catching faint glints of firelight, and his dark eyes fixed on hers with a piercing intensity that made Eliza's breath falter. Outside, the coyotes howled, and the scent of mesquite smoke drifted on the restless wind. She hadn't meant to say it. God help her, she hadn't meant to speak it aloud. But something in her, the same stubborn streak that had once made her ride out against her father's wishes, the same ache that had haunted her since the war stole, a way her husband had pushed the words from her throat before her better sense could stop them. Eliza was 30, old enough to know better, young enough to still want more than the hollow life waiting for her in the frontier town she'd left behind. Her dress, a pale blue once, was torn at the hem from weeks of hard travel, and her boots were caked with dust from the endless roads. She stood with her fists balled tight, her pulse hammering like a war drum. The stakes were heavier than the revolver at her hip. If any settler back in town knew where she was, or what she had just said, she'd be branded a traitor to her people, a woman unworthy of respect or decency. She'd be shunned, spit on, and maybe even dragged before the sheriff for consorting with the enemy. Yet here she stood, in the middle of the desert, inside an Apache warrior's tent, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and yearning she didn't understand. He moved at last. His voice was low, rough, and threaded with suspicion as he said, "Why do you speak such words, white woman? Do you mock me?" Eliza's lips trembled. She wanted to step back to undo what she had said, but instead she met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "I do not mock you." Her voice wavered, then grew steadier. She stopped, swallowed hard. "I want to remember what it feels like to be alive." The Apache's eyes narrowed, the firelight glinting in their depths. He crossed the space between them in a single step, his presence filling the tent. His skin smelled of smoke, leather, and the desert sun, and when he tilted his head down, Eliza felt the warmth of his breath against her cheek. "You think one night can give life back to you?" he asked. There was no softness in his tone, only the harshness of a man who had seen too much death to believe in fleeting comforts. Eliza's throat tightened. Memories surged, the war drums in her chest when she heard her husband had fallen, the empty nights staring at a ceiling that offered no answers, the way the townspeople whispered behind her back, calling her cursed. She'd carried loss like a second skin, and now, looking into the eyes of this warrior, she felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. Hope? No. Something raw. Need? I don't know, she whispered. But I need to try. The wind outside picked up, rattling the tent poles, and the coyotes' cries turned sharper, as though the desert itself listened in judgment. The warrior stepped back, his jaw tight. "You are bold. Or foolish. Maybe both," Eliza admitted, lifting her chin. "But I came here knowing I might not leave at all. So what is one night of truth against a lifetime of lies?" Silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. For the first time, his expression softened, just a flicker, a crack in the stone of his face. He studied her as though weighing her soul, as though trying to decide whether she was enemy, temptation, or something more dangerous still, and Eliza, heart racing, palms damp, every nerve alive, realized this was only the beginning. The fire outside hissed low, embers collapsing in on themselves, while the night stretched vast and endless beyond the canvas walls. Inside the tent, Eliza felt as though the air itself had thickened, pressing down on her chest. The Apache warrior hadn't answered her yet, not truly. His eyes studied her with a careful, unblinking intensity, like a hawk circling prey, weighing if it was worth the strike. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She fought the urge to speak again, to fill the silence. Instead, she steadied her breath and waited, aware that she had crossed a threshold the moment she let those words leave her lips. Finally, he moved. He stepped toward the low table where a clay bowl sat half filled with water. He dipped his hand in, let the droplets slide down his scarred forearm, then spoke without looking at her. "You are not the first white woman to wander into this desert. Some come with fear, some with lies." His voice was low, rough, carrying the weight of too many years. "But you bring something I cannot name," Eliza swallowed. "I didn't come here with lies," he turned then, sharp, eyes narrowing as if testing her words. "Why then? Why risk your life to stand in my tent? You know what your people would say if they knew." The question stabbed at her because she did know. She'd been the widow at the edge of town, the one folks whispered about when her husband never returned from the skirmishes near Apache territory. She'd felt their suspicion, their pity, their coldness. She'd lived in silence too long, her heart a caged bird. "I came," Eliza said, her voice trembling, "because I couldn't stand the silence anymore. Because life has already taken what it wanted from me, and I won't let it take the rest. I want to feel something that's mine." The warrior's gaze softened just slightly, though his body remained as rigid as stone. He stepped closer, the tribal beads and turquoise at his chest glinting faintly in the lantern glow. When he stood mere inches from her, she felt the heat of him radiating, the scent of smoke and earth rising from his skin. "You speak like someone who has lost much," he murmured. "I have." Eliza's throat tightened. "And I don't want to lose myself too." The words surprised her with their rawness. She hadn't planned to bear herself like this, but under his steady eyes, it felt impossible to hide. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The desert's night sounds filtered in the distant bark of coyotes, the whisper of wind shifting the sand. Then the warrior reached out slowly, as though testing her resolve. His fingers brushed a stray strand of her hair, rough against her cheek. Eliza did not flinch. "You are bold." "Eliza," he said at last, speaking her name for the first time. The sound of it on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. "But boldness can burn like fire if you are not careful." She held his gaze, the weight of his hand still lingering near her face. "Then let me burn." The warrior exhaled sharply, a sound between disbelief and something deeper, something he tried to restrain. He stepped back suddenly, as though pulling himself from a dangerous cliff. His chest rose and fell with controlled breaths. "You do not understand what you ask," he said. "My people do not forgive. If they knew you were here, if they knew what you speak to me." He broke off, eyes darkening. Eliza's heart raced, but she lifted her chin. "Then let them judge me. I don't care." Outside, the flap of the tent stirred as the wind swept across the desert floor. For a heartbeat, both froze, listening. The night was no longer just theirs. It carried threats, possibilities, and the certainty that time was running thin. The Apache warrior's hand flexed near the knife at his belt. "Someone comes," he said, his voice clipped. Eliza's breath caught. She had expected whispers, judgment, maybe even rejection, but not danger this soon. The lantern flickered harder, shadows jerking across the tent walls. Whatever awaited outside would decide whether her bold confession had been madness or the beginning of something unforgettable. The flap of the tent stirred again, more forceful this time, and Eliza's breath caught in her throat. The Apache warrior's hand slid to the hilt of his knife, his muscles taut, every line of his body sharpened by instinct. "Stay," he ordered, his voice low but firm, like a command honed from years of survival. Eliza's heart hammered in her chest. The lantern's glow cast wild shadows that trembled across the canvas walls. and she felt the weight of every sound, the faint crunch of sand outside, the faint rattle of something brushing against the poles. The desert was vast, but in that moment the world felt small, shrinking down to the space between her and the man she had dared to speak to with forbidden words. The tent flap lifted. A young Apache boy stepped in, no older than 12, his dark eyes wide. He froze when he saw Eliza, and his small hand went instinctively to the bough slung across his back. His gaze darted between her pale dress and the warrior's steady form. "Elin," the warrior said sharply, lowering his knife. The boy's chest rose and fell fast. "They sent me," he said in his native tongue, though Eliza caught the edge of his words. "Scouts are near. Riders." The warrior's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. He glanced at Eliza, then back at the boy. "Go. Tell them I will come." Elin hesitated, his gaze flicking once more to Eliza with suspicion before he darted out, the flap falling shut behind him. Silence returned, heavier now, the air charged with something Eliza could almost taste. "What riders?" she asked, her voice shaky. The warrior turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Yours," he said simply. "Settlers, soldiers. They searched the desert." Eliza's stomach twisted. Of course they were searching. She had left town without a word, without explanation. By now, someone had surely noticed. Maybe they thought she'd been taken. Maybe they believed she was dead. But the truth, her willingly walking into an Apache camp, was something no one would ever imagine. Her fingers curled against her dress. "If they find me here, they will call you traitor," he finished for her. His eyes pierced into hers. "And they will kill me." The reality of it struck harder than she expected. She had risked her reputation, her safety, even her life, but in this moment it was not just about her. By stepping into his world, she had placed a noose around both their necks. Eliza swallowed hard. "Then we can't let them find me." The warrior studied her as though surprised by the conviction in her voice. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he moved quickly, dousing the lantern with a flick of his hand. Darkness swallowed the tent, broken only by the faint glow of the moon seeping through the canvas. "Follow me," he said. Her heart pounded as he slipped out into the night. She followed, the desert air cool against her face, carrying the sharp scent of sagebrush. Above them, the sky stretched wide and infinite, stars scattered like shards of glass. The camp around them was quiet, the other tents dark. Somewhere beyond, the faint sound of horses drifted on the wind. The warrior led her toward the shadow of a rocky outcrop at the edge of the camp. His movements were silent, fluid, as if he was part of the night itself. Eliza stumbled once on a loose stone, but his hand shot out, steadying her before she could fall. His touch lingered for the briefest heartbeat, rough and grounding, before he let go. They crouched behind the rocks. From there, Eliza could see the faint glow of torches moving across the desert floor. Her chest tightened. Soldiers. She recognized the uniforms even at a distance, their rifles slung over their shoulders, their voices carrying faintly on the wind. "They are close," she whispered. The warrior nodded, his jaw set. "Too close." His hand rested on the handle of his knife again, though he made no move to draw it. His eyes remained fixed on the riders. Eliza felt the weight of the moment pressing in. She had asked for one unforgettable night, not realizing it might come with the cost of blood. The soldiers' voices grew louder, their torches bobbing nearer. The warrior turned to her, his face shadowed but his eyes burning like fire in the dark. "Stay silent," he said. "Whatever happens, do not speak." Eliza nodded, her throat too tight to form words. The riders passed close, their horses snorting, hooves kicking up sand. One torchlight swept dangerously near, illuminating the rocks where Eliza and the warrior crouched. She pressed herself low, her heart hammering so loud she feared they would hear it. The flame wavered, lingered for a breathless instant, and then moved on. Eliza let out a shaky exhale. The danger had passed. For now, the warrior's hand rested lightly on her arm, grounding her, his touch both a warning and a promise. In that moment, Eliza realized something. She had thought this night would be unforgettable for passion, but fate had already chosen to make it unforgettable for survival. The soldiers' torches dwindled into the distance, swallowed by the dark expanse of desert, but Eliza's heart hadn't slowed. Each beat still hammered as though her body hadn't realized the danger had passed. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself, then looked at the Apache warrior crouched beside her. His breathing was calm, controlled, his expression carved in stone. In the faint moonlight, his scars seemed starker, each one a testament to battles survived. His hand lingered near her arm, and though it was steady, Eliza felt the faint tremor of energy that ran through him, as if even he had not escaped the brush of fear. "Are they gone?" she whispered. He shook his head slightly, eyes still fixed on the horizon. "For now. But they will circle back. Soldiers do not give up their prey so easily." The word prey made Eliza's stomach tighten. She glanced toward the faint glow of torches that were fading but not gone. Her people. Her own kind. And yet, in this moment, they felt more like hunters than protectors. The warrior stood slowly, his figure tall and commanding against the star-pierced sky. "We must leave. You cannot stay here. If they find you in my camp, there will be no stopping the blood." Eliza rose beside him, brushing sand from her torn dress. "Where will we go?" His eyes locked onto hers, burning with an intensity that silenced her question. "Far from here. Where they cannot follow." She should have hesitated. She should have thought of her life back in town, of the whispers and judgments she would face if she returned. But the thought of going back at all filled her with a hollow ache. The only truth she knew was the one standing before her, a man both dangerous and alive, whose very presence pulled her from the grave she had been burying herself in. "I'll follow you," she said softly. The faintest flicker crossed his face, surprise, maybe even respect, before he turned and motioned for her to keep close. They moved together, their steps silent across the desert floor. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of sage and dust, the stars gleaming brighter the farther they went from the campfires. After a time, Eliza whispered, "What should I call you?" The warrior glanced at her, his long hair brushing against his shoulders. "My name is Kael." The sound of it settled into her chest, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. She repeated it under her breath, tasting the weight of it. Kael. They climbed a slope of rocks until the camp behind them was nothing but shadows. Ahead lay an open stretch of desert, silvered by moonlight. Kael stopped near a stand of twisted mesquite trees, their branches clawing at the sky. He crouched, motioning for her to sit. "We wait here until the night is deeper," he said. Eliza sank to the ground, the earth cool beneath her. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but her mind was alive, sharper than it had been in years. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, even the whisper of Kael's breath, felt magnified. She looked at him, his profile etched against the moonlight, powerful yet solemn. "Do you always live like this? Watching, hiding, waiting?" Kael's jaw tightened. "It is the way of survival. My people have learned that freedom has a price." Eliza lowered her eyes. She knew something of that price, though in a different way. She thought of the shackles of widowhood, of the judgment that chained her to silence. Maybe that was why his world dangerous, unyielding felt like a strange kind of freedom. "Back in town," she said quietly, "I was already a ghost. Out here with you, I feel alive again." Kael turned toward her then, his gaze sharp, searching. For a moment, the space between them shrank, charged with unspoken words. His hand moved, slow and deliberate, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, rough but tender. "You are reckless, Eliza," he murmured. "And yet I cannot turn you away," her breath caught. The desert seemed to hold its own, the silence vast and expectant. She wanted to speak, to tell him she didn't care about danger, about the world outside. All she wanted was this moment, this man who had become the axis of her wild, desperate choice. But before she could answer, the faint sound of hooves drifted again on the wind. Torches, smaller now, but moving, searching. Kael's hand dropped. His eyes hardened once more. "We move again." Eliza stood, her heart pounding. She realized then that this night was no longer hers to control. She had asked for Unforgettable, and fate had given her more than passion. It had given her a path she could never return from Dod as Kael led her deeper into the desert. Eliza knew one truth. Whatever lay ahead, she had already chosen it. The desert stretched endlessly around them, silvered by moonlight. But inside the small cavern Kael had led her to, the air was warm and still. Shadows danced across the rough walls, carved by centuries of wind and sand. Eliza sank onto the cool stone, her legs trembling from exhaustion, from fear, and from the relentless beating of her heart. Kael crouched opposite her, shirtless, the flicker of firelight catching his bronzed skin and highlighting the scars that told stories she would never fully know. His long black hair fell across his shoulders, a dark curtain framing his face. The tribal jewelry he wore, bone, leather, and turquoise, tinkled faintly when he shifted. Even in the muted light, he radiated strength, danger, and something else, protection. Eliza swallowed hard. "How do you stay so calm?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even when they're so close." Kael's dark eyes studied her, sharp and steady. "Calmness is a choice," he said. "Fear can be useful, but it cannot control me. It blinds, it slows, it kills." Her gaze drifted to his hands, strong and capable, yet gentle when they had brushed her hair back earlier. "You have seen so much death," she murmured. "And yet?" "You keep going." He glanced away briefly, his jaw tightening. "You cannot live without it. Death teaches lessons survival cannot. And yet, some nights you hope for something else. Something more." Eliza's chest tightened. She understood that. She had spent years walking the edge of despair, her life a shadow of grief and loss. And now, in this quiet, candlelit cavern in the middle of the desert, she felt that something more stirring inside her, a heat she had long forgotten. A dangerous hope. She took a cautious step closer. "Do you ever let yourself care?" Kael's gaze met hers, dark and unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, a corner of his mouth lifted in a faint, fleeting smile. "Caring is a risk," he said, "and I have lived a life full of risk. Perhaps it is time to take another." Her breath caught. The words hung between them, fragile and heavy with meaning. Eliza realized she had never met anyone who made her feel both safe and exposed at the same time. Every fiber of her being yearned to bridge the distance between them. The firelight flickered, casting their shadows against the cavern walls. Kael shifted, drawing closer, though he kept his distance just to maintain control. His eyes never left hers. "Tell me," he said softly, "why did you come to me?" "Truly?" Eliza's throat tightened. She could not lie, not to him, not now. "Because I needed to feel alive," she whispered. "I've spent too long hiding in grief, in fear, in a life that feels like ashes. When I saw you, I knew I had a choice, to stay dead inside or to live again, even if it costs me everything." Kael's eyes darkened, the intensity of his gaze almost painful. He leaned closer, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the rough edge of his presence mingling with a gentleness she hadn't expected. "And now?" he asked, Now, she breathed, I choose to live. With you. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the desert silent outside, the night holding its breath. Then Kael's hand brushed lightly against her arm, grounding her, steadying her, yet electrifying every nerve. She leaned into it, daring, trusting, the desert world around them forgotten for these fleeting seconds. A soft sound distant, hoofbeats shattered the fragile calm. Kael's hand withdrew instantly, his body coiled like a spring. He motioned for her to stay low. They circled back, he murmured. We must move, Eliza nodded, her pulse racing. She had wanted an unforgettable night, a night of passion and liberation, but fate, as it often did, had delivered danger first. Kael rose, powerful and silent, offering her his hand. Then let us live, Eliza, together, and survive the night. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth, the strength, the promise in his grasp. In the moonlit desert, with danger pressing from every side, Eliza realized something. She had crossed a threshold. Whatever came next, there was no turning back, and for the first time in years, she welcomed the unknown. The wind had risen, sweeping sand across the desert floor, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant fires. Eliza pressed herself closer to Kael as they crept along a narrow canyon path, the moonlight painting the rocks silver. Each step was cautious. Each shadow could hide a threat. Kael moved like a predator, every muscle taut, every sense alert. His bronzed, scarred chest gleamed under the moon, tribal jewelry clinking faintly as he shifted. Long black hair fell over his shoulders, catching the light, and his dark eyes scanned the horizon, unreadable yet commanding. Eliza's hand brushed against his arm, a subtle contact that sent a shiver down her spine. She felt both protected and exposed, her heart pounding with exhilaration and fear. They've split their search, Kael murmured, his voice low and steady. One group moves toward the North Pass. Another will circle behind the cliffs. We must reach the hidden spring before they find us. Eliza nodded, swallowing hard. She trusted him completely, even as terror coiled in her stomach. The desert night was alive with unseen dangers, the howl of coyotes, the rustle of small creatures, and the ever-present knowledge that human predators were not far behind. The hidden spring was a place Kael had told her of only in fragments, a place of water, shade, and fleeting safety, a sanctuary in the endless wasteland. As they approached, the sound of running water whispered to her like a promise. She dared a glance at Kael. How did you know this place? He glanced at her, eyes dark, unreadable. I know the desert as my own pulse. It teaches those who listen. And I listen. Eliza's chest rose and fell with relief. The spring appeared below, tucked between jagged rocks. Water shimmered silver under the moonlight, the edges lined with smooth stones and sparse desert grass. She knelt and cupped her hands, drinking greedily, the cool water shocking her dry throat. Kael watched her, silent, his expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, he was closer than she realized, the heat of his body radiating toward her. Rest, he said simply. But stay alert. Eliza sank to the ground, leaning against a boulder, the first real moment of respite since she had fled her town and stepped into the Apache camp. Her body ached, her muscles burned, yet her heart thrummed with a strange vitality. She was alive, and every moment with Kael intensified the truth she had spoken months ago. She wanted this night, unforgettable, with him. Kael removed a small satchel from his belt and poured a bit of water into a clay cup, handing it to her. His fingers brushed hers rough, calloused, yet gentle. Eliza caught the fleeting contact, the heat spreading through her, a spark that went far deeper than simple touch. You are bold, Eliza, he said, voice low and almost a growl. Even in the face of death, you speak your truth. Her cheeks flushed, partly from exertion, partly from the weight of his gaze. "I've spent too long hiding," she admitted. "From grief, from fear, from life itself. But with you, I feel awake again." Kael's dark eyes softened slightly, the tension of constant vigilance still evident, but mixed with something deeper, almost fragile. He stepped closer, towering over her, yet careful not to crowd her. "Then do not hide from it," he murmured. "Not from me." The words stirred something inside her, a combination of longing and fear. She wanted to reach out to close the distance, but the desert reminded her that danger never slept. Hooves sounded again in the distance, faint but growing. The soldiers had not given up. Kael's hand brushed lightly against her hair, then dropped, a silent acknowledgement of both the urgency and the connection between them. "We must move again," he said. "Follow me closely. No missteps." Eliza rose, trusting him implicitly. Her hand found his briefly, their fingers brushing, then released, a promise unspoken but deeply understood. They moved silently along the rocky terrain, the hidden spring fading behind them, but the bond between them growing stronger with every step as they disappeared into the shadows of the canyon. Eliza realized that this night fraught with danger, desire, and defiance would be unforgettable not just for passion, but for survival, trust, and the fire that had begun to blaze between them. The desert night watched them, indifferent yet eternal, as Kael led her deeper into the unknown, their fates intertwined, their hearts beating in sync with the pulse of the land around them. The first blush of dawn tinged the horizon, painting the desert in soft pinks and golds, yet the tension remained thick in the canyon air. Eliza and Kael crouched behind jagged rocks, their bodies tense, ears straining for any sign of pursuit. The hooves of soldiers had faded hours ago, but the desert silence felt equally ominous, as if it held its breath, waiting for what would come next. Kael's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, muscles flexing as he scanned the ridges above and below. His long black hair was streaked with dust, tribal jewelry clinking softly with every slight movement. Shirtless, scarred, and imposing, he was a living embodiment of the desert's harsh beauty and of protection. His dark eyes occasionally flicked to Eliza, who crouched beside him, her pale blue dress torn and dusty, her hands resting on her knees, face pale but determined. "You've been quiet," Kael murmured, his voice low but carrying the authority of someone who had seen too much. Eliza looked up at him, her throat tight with emotion. I've been thinking. About everything. About what I said to you that night. About the choices I've made to survive." Kael's gaze softened slightly, the first hint of something almost like warmth in the shadows of his intense expression. "And I don't regret it," she whispered. "I came to you because I wanted to feel alive, because I wanted one night that would change everything. And it has. Every moment with you has been unforgettable." For a heartbeat, Kael said nothing. Then he stepped closer, the desert sun beginning to illuminate the rugged plains of his face. "You speak boldly, Eliza. Boldness has a cost. I'm ready to pay it," she said. Meeting his gaze without flinching, Kael's hand moved slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, lingering just enough to make her heart race. "You have courage," he said, almost a growl, "and a heart unbroken by fear. I've seen many try to hide behind silence or grief, but you do not hide." Eliza's lips parted, breath catching. "And you?" she asked softly. "Do you hide?" Kael's dark eyes darkened, reflecting years of pain and survival, then he shook his head. "Not anymore. Not with you." A sudden rustle in the rocks made them both tense instantly, but it was only the wind carrying grains of sand in dancing spirals. Relief washed over Eliza, and she let herself lean closer to Kael. Their hands brushed, and this time she took his, gripping it tightly. "The soldiers won't find us here," Kael said. Not for a long time. But the desert can be cruel. We must remain vigilant. I don't care, Eliza admitted. Not anymore. I came here to live, and right now. I want to live with you. Not tomorrow, not next week right now. Kael's lips curved into the faintest smile, fleeting and almost vulnerable. Then he lowered himself beside her, so close that she could feel the warmth of his body, the strength of his presence. Then we live, he said, voice low and steady, and this night, these days will belong to us. Forever in memory. Eliza leaned her head against his shoulder, inhaling the scent of smoke, earth, and sun-warmed skin. Her fingers traced the lines of his scars, rough yet tender under her touch. It's unforgettable, she whispered. Yes, Kael murmured. Unforgettable, and ours. For the first time since she had fled her town, Eliza allowed herself to close her eyes, to trust completely, to feel alive in a way she had thought impossible. The desert stretched endlessly around them, but in this small sanctuary, danger and past grief faded. Only the pulse of their hearts, the warmth of their bodies, and the certainty of survival remained. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, casting gold over the canyon walls. And in that vast wilderness, two souls, one hardened by loss, the other by fear and grief, found solace, passion, and the unforgettable truth. That life, when seized with courage, could be breathtakingly beautiful. Eliza opened her eyes to meet Kael's, and for the first time, the desert felt alive with promise rather than peril. Together they rose, hands intertwined, ready to face whatever the world might throw at them. One night had become more than a moment, it had become a beginning. In the endless stretch of the Old West, where danger and desire intertwined, their story was only just starting.